It is great warning. Hey guys, it's Junk here. Hello, and I am going to attempt to do, damn it, pinhole. I'm going to attempt to do a very quick tutorial on fiberglass. Got asked by somebody how to do it, and I'm going to try and do it here in as few shots as possible. So let me get started with what fiberglassing is. It's basically taking a resin like this, fiberglass resin made by Bondo, taking something that's fiberglass, which is this is chopped mat, and you can see each one of these is a little tiny strand of glass. They're actually very thin. This one right here is probably made up of like 150,000 little tiny strands of glass. And if you think I'm just bullshitting a little bit, I wish I had here. This is black. Maybe this will pick it up. It looks like one hair, but there are hundreds of tiny little hairs in there. You can kind of see it there a little bit. Anyways, so each piece of this is like bajillions of glass together, all woven in these little different directions. Or you can get woven glass like this, which is more like a soft material. And it's really strong, and it's woven together rather than just chopped and put every which way. Third thing you'll need is something to pour your resin in, a crappy chip brush. These are like 99 cents at Home Depot. And I forgot to mention wax. That's one thing I didn't mention, but you're gonna need wax. Auxiliary tools that you're gonna need are rollers, and I'll get one of those in a minute. But really, that's all it takes. You just really need the glass and the resin, and then something to mix and pour it with, or mix it into, and that's it, aside from the piece that you want to make. So let's get to a little demo. So I'm just doing this in regular street clothes, but if you're going to be doing this, you want to wear something crappy. Getting fiberglass in your clothes isn't the end of the world, but it does poke you. If you imagine walking around barefooted on a barber's floor. So I'm going to blow some of these little strands and stuff off. If it gets in your clothes, it's no big deal. You wash them in the laundry, it's gone. It doesn't. I know there's some people that are like, oh my God, if fiberglass gets on you, it's the end of the world. It's not. So let's say you want to do something simple. I'm going to be using paper towels as our fiberglass, so I don't have to use real fiberglass. And it's that simple. You probably could use paper towels actually instead of woven mat or chopped mat strand. You could just use paper towels. The resin bonds to this, and that's what gives it its form and strength. It doesn't matter that it's fiberglass or not. I actually laid up a piece of dryer Downy or Gain or something like that dryer sheet just to see if it could be done. I've seen people that have done massive amounts of artwork that just needed something to hold the resin together. Use dryer lint as their substrate. So this just kind of holds the resin and gives it shape, and it'll give it color obviously too. So I'm going to use these in place of chopped pieces of fiberglass, and instead of resin, I'm just going to use water, and we're going to demonstrate how to do it. The last tool that I didn't mention is a roller, and this is important because between layers of fiberglass, you're going to want to roll air bubbles out of your between the mat and the resin. You're going to want to roll it and make sure that it's all wet and there's no air bubbles. Then you're going to want to lay your second layer down and roll it and just work it. They come in different sizes depending on what you need. And then like this one's pretty cool because you can get into corners and roll edges and things like that. So all these little ridges do is just help press air bubbles out. And you can see this one has a little bit of dried resin on it. It didn't. I clean them up before I do my next project, but I also try to wipe them off with lacquer thinner or acetone to get it cleaned up beforehand. So let's say you have something like this that isn't too complicated, but it isn't exactly simple either. First thing you need to do is say, hey, how do I want to lay the fiberglass over this? Do I want to glass this up? Because no matter how many layers of glass you put over this, it's going to be obviously as fat as the outside of this. If this is really thick and you needed it to fit the inside of something, you might want to glass the inside instead. What I do is I usually glass over things and make a mold. Here is a mold of the front end of the VFR. It's a 3-piece front end, and I've made molds of this thing. I disassembled it and just made a mold of one of the sides, and then I also made a mold of the center and a mold of the other side, and it's a 3-piece, goes together in 3 pieces. Alternatively, I did a 1 full piece, and then I just did an outer piece. But yeah, doing things like this is just a simple cap. The dimensions on the inside are what's going to match up to the dimensions of the actual part. So if I were to lay up a part in here, I would wax this and coat it with the wax a few times, about 6 or 7 times, let it dry, coat it again. And then I would start laying my fiberglass in here, and when I pop it out of here, and that wax helps it release, when I pop it out of here, it's going to be the dimension of the actual VFR piece. If I were to try to lay this on the VFR, it'd be off by just a little bit, the width, the thickness of your piece. So that's step number 1. Decide if you're going to be doing something totally to spec. If you are, you may want to make a mold, waste a little bit of fiberglass to make something that when you pop it out, now you have the inner dimensions, and when you put your fiberglass in here, it's going to come out exactly the dimensions of the piece that you have, not any bigger, or if you threw it in here, not any smaller. And if I had tabs and stuff in here, I wouldn't even be able to cast it in here because I wouldn't be able to lay it flat. And if it had like, you know, long stems for bolts and stuff like that to come up. So if I wanted it to be flat, I have to do it on this outside. So that's another consideration. Consideration number 2, let's say I want to just make a side cover for my bike. It's a pretty simple shape. Usually I'll draw it on here how I want it to look, and then I do CAD, take it to CAD. And not computer-aided design, cardboard-aided design. As you can see, this is just a piece of cardboard here. And I would literally just cut out the piece that I want. Let's just make a simple, let's make a crappy little side cover, and I'll even use this as like a, so let's do that. And then we're gonna come back. We'll go over this way. All right, and let's say that's the shape of the side cover that I want. I'm gonna cut it out all the way, and if it has any mounting tabs or anything I need to put on the back, I can add those later. But for right now, let's just do this on the fly in real time and lay it up in some fake fiberglass, which I'm gonna use my paper towel for. And I will add maybe a little design or something to it, or maybe you have a lip or something that you need to add to the back to make it fit your frame or whatever perfectly. We'll simulate that too, so you can get an idea of how much work goes into it. So here's our side cover we're gonna make. Let's say it has like you need it to bulge out over the frame or something like that. So, down here along the bottom. So we know that. I'm gonna set it here. I'm gonna make a little, use it to copy the shape here. And then, like before, whenever you're doing something like this, you got to take into consideration that this is just a shell. So let me concentrate and not cut off my fucking finger here. So this is just a shell. So, okay, we're done with this piece. If I put this here, when I cast this or lay the fiberglass over it, the fiberglass is going to go and come up. It's not going to fill this area down here, so you'll basically have like a little hollow space. So if I glue this on here, and let's get some glue real quick and just stick that there. Scooby Scooby-Doo. There you go. As you can see, that stuck perfectly. So this glue is actually pretty good. You gotta let it tack up a second. So anyways, now when I put this on here, my fiberglass is going to not take up any of this. It's just gonna come up and bulge out a little bit. But that's what I want, because I want it to stick over my frame. So there we go, simple side cover. And if you have fiberglass now to lay it up, let me get some water. we're going to pretend this is resin, and it doesn't matter how much resin you use, it has a working time. This resin tells me right here that it is approximately 8 to 12 minutes at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So you only have 8 to 12 minutes. I only mix this up in like 4 to 6 to maybe 8 ounce batches. And it's sandable in 2 hours. It becomes very hard very fast. It actually gets hot. And it will catch on fire. As you can see, they're showing you there's like a lid that comes on some of these little smaller. If you get like the small bottle of this stuff, it comes with the lid on top of it. And they're showing you the lid, so they're not even mixing up very much on here. Like I said, I usually mix up between 4 to 8 ounces, depending on how much I need. Here's a mixing cup. There's 4 ounces, there's 8. As you can see, this is a 72 ounce cup. Yeah, 72. 2.4, that's 72, right? Anyways, excuse me, I only mix up, you know, out of these 24 ounces, barely using a third of it. If I mix up this whole thing, I better have a pretty good sized panel that I'm covering, and I better be able to work it in 8 minutes, 8 to 12 minutes. So I don't recommend doing much more than 4 ounces, especially for something this small. 4 ounces will totally cover this twice over. So the next thing I'm going to do before I even pour resin, before I even do anything, I'm going to measure out my mat and make sure that it make sure that I have enough. And this would be perfect if I cut my mat into these size strips, and this is my actual side cover. Looky here, it's going to fit pretty perfectly, and I'm not going to have any too much left over. You might want to leave a little because you always cut it off. So if you have it exact, you might run out, especially when this bend goes up here. It might take a little bit of slack out of it, and I might not have enough, so I might have to overlap it. You might come up this short, you know. Yeah, see, when I bend it, it shortens it just a tad. So what we want to do is make sure you have enough to cover it at all times. So anyways, I'm going to measure out my mat. Let's just say I had that much here. And I'm going to need to cut a little strand off for there. That'd be fine. I'll be good with this. So what I'm going to do is measure this out, especially if you're doing something that's round. Look what's going to happen when I put this over it. It doesn't fit. I'm going to have to press this down here and here. Well, now look, there's all these like ridges and seams and pleats. What I would do if I was going to cast something round is I would come in and lay my mat over it, and then bring scissors and cut like a little flower shape, so that when I lay it on here, I can then just like wrap each little tab over as I'm glassing it up, and it'll go over it much nicely, and it won't have any of these pleats and things like that in it. It'll lay flat, and then when it's drying, it's not going to want to pop up like this. It'll be cut and it'll lay flat, so it'll be good. So if you're doing anything with shapes other than flat, I always recommend measuring this out, looking where you have a pattern or some sort of shape, and if you do, cut. And if I had like, you know, a weird shape like this, I'd want to cut to that, cut it to this, so that it lays on there nicely, and then it can come up, and this has like a bulbous shape or a dip. Well, then I'd come over here and lay another piece and cut it so that everything matched up perfectly and wrapped around. I can guarantee you on this one, you've got a little bit of downhill right here. It comes in and down. It wraps it down here and right here. This is a corner. And so, you know, you have to cut. And this bend right here, as it wraps in and bends, had to cut a bunch there. And this little recess right here where the mirror goes, it's kind of hard to see because it's all one color. It's pretty flat. But there's a lip right here that's just about a finger's depth here, but actually sticks up and goes down here. Let me see if I can turn this so you can see it. Yeah, so it's got a bunch of shapes, and what you got to do is you got to kind of cut and lay out before you just start glassing up. You'd be sad if you do. So this is going to be here. I got 3 layers here because I want it to be pretty strong. And one layer, this is one layer right here. As you can see, it flexes pretty good. And this is fine. If I'm gonna cast from this, I'd put another layer over this so that it'd get more rigid, and then another layer so it'd get more rigid, and this would be super hard, especially if I'm gonna actually use this for a piece. I'd put 5 or 6 layers probably, so that there'd be no flex. Now, if I need this to flex so that I can shape it, because I'm gonna cast it later like in this shape, then fine. But you know, this is supposed to be this shape, and I would want it to be super rigid. So if I were gonna use this to cast from, I'd probably put another exterior layer on here just so that it held its shape exactly how I wanted it. And it was nice and strong. So ours, we're gonna have 3 pieces of mat. What we're gonna do is, like I said, our fiberglass tells us to, we got 8 to 12 minutes at 75 degrees. And then right here it says 1 ounce of resin will require 10 drops of hardener or 6 tablespoons of resin with a 1/4 teaspoon of hardener. So this stuff comes with a little tube of hardener, and when you measure it out, you measure out 4 ounces. How many drops is that? If it's 10 per ounce, you're gonna put 40 drops in here. Now I have a little measuring cup specifically for hardeners, and it's tiny. It's like the size of a shot glass because the ratio is like -12 to 3, you know what I'm saying? It's very small. So what I would do is I would get my cup ready, pour my resin in here. Let's just say we're gonna use 4 ounces. There's 4 ounces, 4 ounces of resin. And then some people do it this way and some people say don't do it this way. I like to wet my piece first, and actually I'm skipping a step here. You got it? You got your little shape that you want? Wax this. Put some wax on it or spray some mold release if you have it. Or wrap it in saran wrap, aluminum foil, duct tape, whatever you can that's going to make a barrier, because if you don't, the resin and the fiberglass is going to stick to that big time. Whoops. Going to stick to that, and you won't be able to get this piece out of the resin without wrecking either the fiberglass or the piece. Luckily this is cardboard. If I forgot to wax this, I could just tear this out, and the only thing that'll be left is a small layer of paper. But yeah, wax it. Some people even use talcum powder. I've never used that. That's more for casting like resins in a mold. But you could also just lay saran wrap, duct tape, like I said, whatever you got. So what I do first is I wet my piece so that the fiberglass has something to stick to. So I'm gonna get this, pretend this is resin, and we put our hardener and you mixed it thoroughly. Now the time is ticking. You have 8 minutes to do this. I come in here and I either paint or tap my piece like this. And if I'm doing a huge piece, like a really big panel or something, like the hood of a car, I would do it in sections, and I would just tap out what I have to work with in 8 minutes. Boom, I've just covered this. It's sticky. This resin's gonna be sticky now, and this will hold to it. And then I have a that little step here. I wanna make sure I get that real well. You know, make sure you got some resin on there. And now that you have it all ready, you lay your mat on it, and I usually start at one end like this, and I'm left-handed, so I shouldn't have started on this side, but I start tapping, and you can see how the water is coming through it already. There you go. And I usually start tapping. I don't usually brush like this because it doesn't really work that well, but I tap and get some resin, tap, and then right here, you can see, I'm gonna zoom in. Even with the paper towel, it's happening. There's an air bubble right there, and you can see it because it's white. So in real life, I'm gonna grab my brush, and I'm not gonna tap this first. I'm gonna work that to completion and make sure that it's really well taken care of. And then this might be one where I come in here and I see it's not gonna work. Quickly grab my knife and I cut. And you can do that. I mean, you can cut all the way down, or if it is laying flat and it looks nice, you just keep working it. But you can cut once it's starting to wet in. Don't worry, you can make adjustments. If I needed to, I could tear this whole piece of cloth off, and it might be ruined, but at least I ruined this much and not like a whole piece, you know. But this is actually laying on there pretty nice. So I'm gonna keep tapping, and you can brush like this, but as you can see, it doesn't push the air bubbles out. The reason I tap is because it taps the air bubbles out as you go. Continue to tap, 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 tap. Now look, I missed the top of the thing up here. That's what I was saying. I didn't lay this on there very flat when I was doing it, but layer 2, guess what? We'll get it with layer 2. So yeah, as I'm tapping, I'm usually working. You see these little air bubbles here? That was a good example. It worked itself backwards, and that's what it'll do if you don't tap it out. So that's why I always start on one side and tap like toward the outsides and toward the leading edge. So up here you can see I like tapped out to the front, to the top. On this side, I'm gonna tap toward the leading edge, and it's not laying down into the resin yet where it's sticky. So I just keep getting it wet with resin, keep tapping toward the front, and anything that's like this down here, I'm gonna tap toward the edge. You want all those air bubbles out. You want no air getting in here, because it'll make a weak layer in your piece. And then I'm going to show you why you need the rollers too. So there, that's done. And I usually, obviously you want to put something underneath here, but I also usually go down the edge, the sides like this, and tap. Let me see if I can come down here a bit. You still got to tap from the top down because you want to work that. You don't want any air to get trapped under here. But I know I may be cutting this off anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. But look right here, where it bends up, we're going to get a pleat. And if I didn't want that, I needed to come here and cut it with my scissors or like my knife. Or if this is going to hang off the edge and get cut off anyway, I guess I don't really care, but you still want to be consider stuff like that and tap from the top down, because if you do get any air down here where you're going to cut it away anyway, that's where you want it to get trapped. So wrap stuff over, tap it from the top down, and here we go. Right, we're almost done with layer 1. Tap, 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 tap. I'm going to kind of go fast since I know this is getting a little bit long, and I know this probably is fun to watch. So there we go, and this would be our first piece. Still tapping there, and I'm going to flip this over so you can see there's no, this got in there pretty good. There's not really any air bubbles, and it's not sticking out from the edge there. If it were, that's fine. That's what you have a roller for. So now I'm going to grab my little small roller here, and you can do this anyway. Once you get it done, you roll it, and like I usually roll toward the edge. If there's little air bubbles, like there was one there, there's a little tiny one here. I don't know if the camera's picking it up. You can see a little bit of white right there. Watch. Boom. And these grooves in here push the air down and out. So I roll toward the edges. And if it's here in the middle, I mean, if I see something, I'll roll it toward the pocket of air. And then this one, you can roll down toward the edge and roll over the edge just to help it out. Now on the corner here, whoops. On the corner here, this thing rolled against it and peeled it out a little bit, and you wouldn't want that. You see how now it's making air bubbles and tearing it? I don't think it would do that with the actual chopped mat or the woven, but let's just say it did. That's what this baby's for right here. This is for getting in those edges and rolling it flat. And that's why having special tools is good sometimes. This can roll it back and fix it, or conversely, I'd have to roll it this way. I'm going to pick this up and turn it. I would never do this with a real piece, but you can see how much of this I'm wasting. Like this little edge, wasting this whole tiny roller. Imagine having this big fat mamma jamma, and you're using like 2 rolls of it. That's why it's cool to have a special tool like this that will get in there and push that down. And as you can see the shape, it's actually going to curve over the L really nice if I do it this way, or if I get in there like this. So anyways, long story short, we're going on 22 minutes, and this is basically how you do it. Step 2, just rinse and repeat. It's wet now, and it's been rolled, and there's no air in it whatsoever. I'm going to take my second piece of mat, lay it on there, and as you can see, it's going to start getting in there. This isn't this is live. Doing this live. I don't know how many minutes it's been in between when I put that first layer and this layer, but I think it's still 12 minutes within our 12 to 8 minute range. So I'm going to tap this out toward the edge and tap this down into that, and then I'll start working again. And then I'll speed this up, so I won't really, you kind of have to do it exactly the same way you do fiberglass, but I won't try not to take 20 more minutes. I'll just get it real wet so you can see how it looks. Pretend I'm doing this in fast motion and I'm being real careful to get all the air bubbles out. And actually I'll leave a couple in there so you can see how to fix them with the rollers. All right, there, we're done. Now you can see there's a lot of air bubbles in there, and you don't want that at all. So I'm gonna get with my roller here and roll them toward the edge. They just disappear. And I know this is a paper towel and not fiberglass, but it works the same way. This one has a bubble here. I know toward this edge, they're like this, so there's a place for the air to escape. So I'm gonna get my little specialty roller here. Roll it on down this way. And if you do see stuff that has a bubble like right in the middle, you're like, shit, that is not gonna roll out, and everything's flat around it, get you a utility knife or something, and you can cut the mat, cut the thing. It might puff up like this did, like that, boop, but there's a hole there now, and you can actually see the hole. So guess what? Air can get out. There you go. Boop, 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 boop. And that's basically how you do fiberglass. And this would be two layers right here. The more layers you put, the stronger it gets, the thicker it gets. And in order to not make this a 75-minute video, I will show you. This is very, very, very thin. Like I said, this is one layer. This is basically just like a placeholder, and it's all burnt on the edges because I used a wheel, or oh no, that's paint in there. Laid it over some painted parts. Here is a mold I made of the windscreen of the VFR, and this laid over the windscreen. It's pretty thick. It's like probably 2 or 3 mil thick, and I put a gel coat on the inside as well. It's nice and smooth. It doesn't look smooth, but it's really smooth. This is a piece I made from it. Let me zoom out a little here. This piece lays on the inside, so when I cast this laid over the windshield of the VFR, and the inside dimension here, like I was telling you earlier at the beginning when you're deciding which side you need, this inside dimension is the actual dimension of the real windshield. So when I put this in here and pulled it off, this is the actual dimension of the VFR. The thickness is, I think this is 3 layers, and it's like less than 1 millimeter thick. So I mean, and it's really smooth. It's hard to tell because the paint on here looks like crap, but maybe I can get this angle. It's like glass smooth. So the smoother the inside of your mold, the smoother your end product will be. And likely when this is done, you know, like in a couple hours, this will be hard if the temperature's right. If it's cold, it's going to take longer to cure. If it's hot, this thing would have started hardening in 5 minutes. And when you start to pour your resin out or try to get it out and it starts to get real thick, you're done. Don't try to save it or it's going to gloop on there and not go flat. You're done. You just got to start over. And now that you got this done, and let's pretend it's hard, you can cut it off the soft parts. If this has resin on it and it's really hard, you just get you a little Dremel or something like that and saw it around the edges. And then when you pull it off, boom, bang, bing, you got an exact replica of your part. And when you pull it off, the inside is going to be exactly what this looks like. So if this has little rough patterns on it like this corrugated cardboard does, your inside will look like that too. So if you like the way it looks, then use this and put wax here and do the same exact thing that you did to make this. Wax it up, get it all nice and ready to release, and then put your new fiberglass in here and pop it off, and it'll be the exact shape of the exact dimensions of this. This is going to be the dimensions of the outside of this as it is right now. So And then if you were to lay more fiberglass in here and pop it out, it would be the exact dimensions of this. And yeah, that's fiberglass in a nutshell in under half an hour. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And if you have any questions, go ask somebody who knows what they're talking about. Bye! Here's what you can do if you're patient. Bye!